Neil went into the hospital the next morning and straight into surgery for the reinsertion of the infusion pump. At Neil's insistence, Ethan went on to his job, but Leah skipped school so that she could hang around the waiting room with her mother. Leah had hardly slept the night before. Her mind spun. Not only was Neil facing medical uncertainty, but also she wondered what the failure of his chemo protocol might mean for her. If she relapsed, would she also have to endure an experimental drug program? The revelations about her father, mother, and grandmother haunted her. How could she have never known the truth? Why hadn't anyone told her until now? Leah and her mother sat together in an empty waiting room. Her mother sipped coffee and stared out the window at the bleak February landscape. Leah fidgeted, wanting to talk to her mother and not knowing how to begin. Her mother relieved her of her dilemma when she said, "Neil told me he talked to you yesterday in the barn. He told me everything the two of you talked about." "You should have been the one to tell me," Leah said, knowing she sounded hurt. "Why am I always the last to know about everything in this family?" "It isn't a conspiracy, Leah. I was going to tell you about your father. I just never knew how." "The same way you told Neil. You just say it." Leah paused as another thought occurred to her. "You're not mad at Neil, are you? Because if you are—" "I'm not mad at Neil," her mother said. "He wouldn't do anything to hurt either of us." Leah stood, unable to sit still one more minute. "I know what Neil told me, but I'm mixed up. You once told me that the reason you wouldn't let me see Grandma Hall was because you were mad at Dad for not being able to take care of us. You said that you were bitter and that you took it out on her." Leah recalled as if it had been yesterday the conversation she had with her mother when she'd been hospitalized. "So which is it?" "I also told you that your father wasn't well psychologically, that the closest I ever got to telling you about how sick he really was. I should have told you everything then, but I didn't." "Why not?" Her mother shrugged. "If you could have seen the look that crossed your face when I told you as much as I did, you know why. You looked horrified, and then hostile, as if you'd never accept anything negative about him from me. You had him built up in your mind to godlike status. You were also being told at the same time by your doctors that you had cancer, and you might lose your leg. I couldn't trash your father to you. It wouldn't have been right. You needed to concentrate on the future, not the past. Why is everybody always trying to protect me instead of being honest with me? Neil said you divorced Dad because you were afraid of our safety. Is that true? Did you think Dad would have hurt us?" It pained Leah to deeply think such things about her father. "You idolized your father, Leah. You were Daddy's little girl from the time you were born. In spite of everything that happened, I wanted you to have that illusion. But it was all a lie." "No," her mother said. "When he was in his right mind, it was true. But when he had an episode, when he heard voices telling him to protect you, even if it meant running away with you or hiding you, I panicked. One night I came home from work and he thought I was the angel of death come to snatch you away. That's when I moved out. I didn't have any place to go. My parents were dead, and Grandma Hall thought I was a horrible person for deserting her son. I found us a dumpy little trailer in a crummy trailer park, but it was all I could afford. I worked nights and a neighbor watched you. I married Don when you were 5. Lee remembered the trailer more clearly than she did her first stepfather. He took off when she was 6. The trailer remained her home until she was almost 7. When Leah's mother would go to work, Leah would lie alone in the dark, terrified, listening to the sounds of the night outside her window. They had moved from the trailer into an apartment when Leah's mother married her third husband. The marriage, too, had ended in divorce. Leah had been 9, but when Leah was 10 her real father died, homeless and alone in an alley far away in Oregon. Then Grandma Hall died, and Leah's mother married for the 4th time. Leah's fourth stepfather was years younger than her mother, and Leah had disliked him intensely. He left them less than a year later. Then she and her mother lived alone for 2 years. Finally Neil had entered their lives and had given them a sense of being cared for. Leah had thought the hard times were finally over, but she was wrong. Now they might lose Neil to cancer. Leah turned to face her mother. "Neil said Grandma Hall tried to get custody of me. Is that true?" "She threatened me with a custody battle right after your father and I separated," her mother replied. "Voices had told them that a mysterious stranger was stalking him and was going to kill him. It wasn't true, of course, just another one of his delusions. But he left me with a pile of bills, a child to raise, and no money. I was angry. When your grandmother tried to take you away, I freaked. Of course we never went to court, but I swore that she'd never see you again." But she did, Leah thought. Her grandmother had sneaked into Leah's daycare centers and schools to visit her. Even now Leah couldn't bring herself to tell her mother that. "But when she got sick, you took me to the hospital to see her." "I did," her mother said with a sigh. "I felt sorry for her. She was alone. her son, your father, was dead, and she had no one else in the world but you, and I didn't want her to die without making my peace with her." Leah realized that many of her notions, ideas, and impressions of her childhood were not correct. She thought her father had been a sad and lonely man, driven off by her mother. Her recollections of her mother's and grandmother's animosity had been true enough, but now Leah understood their enmity. Maybe her grandmother had meant well, but wouldn't any mother fight to keep her only child? Even her mother's many marriages took on new meaning for Leah. Her mother had married to improve her lot in life. Using marriage to better oneself seemed distasteful to Leah, but she realized that her mother had probably considered herself resourceful each time. Leah began to understand why her mother had always worked at mental jobs. Without a high school diploma, she'd probably had no choice. From the nurse's desk down the hall, Leah heard a doctor being paged. Weak February sunshine pulled on the toe of her boot. The smell of old coffee hung in the air. A nurse's aide rattled bedpans as she walked down the hallway. "So is that it?" Leah asked quietly. "Is that everything there is for me to know about my dad, about the past?" "Yes," her mother answered. Then she added, "Just one other thing. You may not understand a lot of my choices. You may be angry about the way things went for you as you were growing up. But until you have a child of your own, until you have to make choices and decisions for your child's welfare, please hold back judgment on the way I've handled things." Leah stared at her mother. At the moment, she couldn't imagine having a child of her own. At the moment, she couldn't imagine even wanting one. The experimental drug was not kind to Neil. He became deathly sick. His hair fell out, sores erupted on his body. He lost so much weight that he couldn't wear any of his clothes, and Leah's mother had to buy him a new wardrobe. Once Dr. Nguyen allowed him to go home, Neil stayed in bed too ill to get up. Leah watched a few of their favorite television shows with him at night, but Neil usually fell asleep. Sometimes he felt so nauseated he had to be helped to the bathroom. Ethan continued to be invaluable to the household. He did every chore Leah's mother asked him to, and continued to keep Neil's cars clean and polished, all while he worked days at Dr. Prater's. His presence brought calm and eased tension in the house. Leah's mother was less likely to fly off the handle when Ethan was around. Leah was more likely to be nice to her mother in Ethan's company. Neil kept saying how grateful he was that Ethan was looking out for them. Neil apologized to Ethan over his inability to continue to search for Eli. Ethan assured him it was all right. I'll get back to it when I'm feeling better," Neil promised. Ethan received letters from his family, and he occasionally wrote letters home. He never shared the contents of his mail with Leah except to say, "Charity sends a hello to you." It hurt Leah that he didn't, but then she had not told him of her talks with Neil and her mother, either. She was trying to hide the information about her childhood from him, but she knew it was totally out of his Amish frame of reference. How could he ever relate to a father gone mad, or to a childhood filled with a regiment of stepfathers, or to a marriage vows broken with the rap of a judge's gavel? In March, Leah received her SAT scores. She was stunned to learn that she had scored high enough to rank 19th in her senior class of 321. "Wow," Sherry said in awe. "I didn't know you were so smart. No offense." "None taken," Leah said with a laugh. "I didn't know either." The news gave Neil a spurt of energy he hadn't had in weeks. "Good for you, kiddo," he said from his bed when she told him. A smile lit his haggard face. Her mother acted especially pleased about her scores. "I always knew you were bright. I read to you every night before bed when I didn't have to go to work." Leah was ashamed to admit that she didn't remember. Leah's school counselor called her in to discuss her scores. "Surely you've chosen a college by now," Mrs. Garvey said. Flustered, Leah answered, "No, I'm not even sure I'm going to college." Mrs. Garvey leafed through Leah's records. "I know that your grades aren't exemplary, but you've brought them up steadily over the past year, and now your SATs prove that you're college material. You really should consider going, Leah. There are many fine colleges and universities in Indiana if going too far from home is a problem." Leah had too much on her mind at the moment to do more than nod, thank the counselor, and take a sheaf of brochures from her.